Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born into comfort. Raised on a sprawling Hudson Valley estate in New York, young Franklin's childhood was defined by wealth, elite schooling, and the belief that he was destined for something significant. But in the quiet moments behind the privilege was a boy who felt like he didn't quite measure up. He was the distant cousin of President Theodore Roosevelt, an icon of rugged masculinity, war, and action. Franklin admired him, almost obsessively. And yet, Franklin's early life was filled with self-doubt, especially under the pressure of his demanding mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, who tightly controlled his world. But deep inside, Franklin had something else, a quiet fire. He was not the loudest in the room, but he was observant, curious, empathetic, and unusually good at making people feel heard. That inner spark, an unshakable belief that leadership could be gentle, yet powerful, would come to define him. He rose quickly in politics, becoming Assistant Secretary of the Navy and even a vice presidential candidate by 1920. But it wasn't the campaign trail that would shape his character most. It was a devastating blow to his body. In 1921, at just 39 years old, Franklin Roosevelt was struck by polio. The disease paralyzed him from the waist down. It could have ended everything. But it didn't. Instead, it became his defining crucible. Roosevelt refused to accept that he would never walk again. With steel braces, relentless therapy, and a stubborn optimism, he taught himself to stand, to appear strong, even if every step was agonizing. He retreated to Warm Springs, Georgia, and built a rehabilitation center, not just for himself, but for others suffering the same fate. There, he wasn't a politician. He was a man among men who had fallen and were trying to rise again. And when he returned to politics, something had changed. He no longer spoke like a patrician from Hyde Park. He spoke like a man who had suffered, who had lost and learned. He could look into the eyes of the jobless, the sick, the beaten, and they believed him. In 1932, during the darkest days of the Great Depression, Roosevelt ran for president with a simple, radical promise. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He was elected in a landslide. But taking office didn't solve anything overnight. Banks were collapsing. Unemployment was at 25%. People were starving. Roosevelt responded not with panic, but with action. Dozens of sweeping programs and reforms under his New Deal. He created Social Security. He built bridges, roads, and dams. He hired artists and teachers. He gave America purpose again. And while his legs couldn't carry him far, his voice carried across the nation through his Fireside Chats, warm, plain-spoken radio broadcasts that made every citizen feel like he was speaking just to them. "The president talks to me," one coal miner said. "He understands." Half a decade later, Roosevelt faced a second cataclysm, World War II. As Europe fell to fascism, FDR steered the US toward readiness, even as many urged isolation. After Pearl Harbor, he became a wartime president, determined, unflinching, and committed to a global vision of democracy. He led with steadiness, not through rage or vengeance, but with strategy, unity, and empathy for the average soldier and family left behind. By 1944, Roosevelt was exhausted. His health was failing, but he ran for an unprecedented fourth term because the world wasn't ready to move on, and neither was he. He didn't live to see victory in Europe. He died in April 1945, just weeks before the Nazis surrendered. But what he left behind was more than policies or programs. He left behind a model of leadership grounded in humility, resilience, and hope. Even his fiercest critics admitted, Roosevelt made Americans believe again. Winston Churchill once said, "Meeting Franklin Roosevelt was like opening your first bottle of champagne. Knowing him was like drinking it." And he didn't just lead through history's darkest storms. He embodied the kind of leader the world needed, calm under pressure, compassionate under fire, and courageous when it mattered most. So what made Franklin D. Roosevelt so uniquely powerful? 1. Radical empathy through listening. Roosevelt was known to spend hours talking with farmers, factory workers, wounded veterans. He believed leadership began not with talking, but with listening. It made him a president who truly understood the people he served. 2. Stubborn optimism in the face of pain. He refused to be defined by his paralysis. Whether through daily physical routines, political setbacks, or wartime losses, FDR maintained a belief that better was possible, and that belief was contagious. 3. Speaking simply to build trust. In a time of confusion, he cut through the noise with clarity. His Fireside Chats became famous for turning policy into conversation. His ability to simplify complexity without dumbing it down built deep trust with millions. Franklin D. Roosevelt's inner spark wasn't rooted in strength of body. It was rooted in moral clarity, relentless hope, and the courage to change his mind. He showed the world that a leader didn't need to walk into a room to command it. He just needed to care deeply, loudly, and without apology. From the quiet halls of Hyde Park to the global stage of war, Franklin D. Roosevelt proved that the greatest power isn't control, it's connection. His body may have broken, but his will never did. And in a century filled with chaos, he gave us 4 terms of hope, healing, and history. What do you think made FDR a leader for the ages? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of people who didn't just shape the world, they lifted it.